The echo of footsteps along the empty courtyard could not sway Suguru into believing that they were anyone's but his own. A single set, one step after another in tandem with his movements, delayed by the shortest of windows to create an illusion that someone else was following along behind him. With the breeze absent, the only sound that remained was deafening to Suguru's ears, cutting into each thought as he worked through just how the day got away from him. To be dragged along by Satoru's whims was one thing, but to fall into the intrigues of curses from the future, of all the places to claim to be from, was another matter entirely. Suguru supposed, if anything good had come of this, it would be that he was no longer subjected to the horde of bodies choking the air out of Shibuya Station. How contradictory of him, to loathe the countless days, weeks, he'd been left to his own devices, left alone, that the first opportunity he had to spend time with Satoru, never around, did Suguru discover his intense hatred for loud, obnoxious crowds. Even Satoru's natural penchant for demanding his place at the center of attention could not draw Suguru's mind away from the sheer volume Satoru had to compete with. Indulging Satoru's whims should have been worth the assault on Suguru's patience. For one day, the clock could in all its callous nature, should have found pity within its mechanical heart to at least grant Suguru the ability to pretend nothing had changed between them. Satoru denied such change, so why couldn't he? But then, of course, something had to go awry. It was no Suguru to whom the clock ticked backward, but two others, two curses, who claimed to be from 11 years in the future as if his wish was not that of fantasy. To believe such lofty claims from a cursed spirit of all things masquerading as human. How could Suguru believe anything that came from their mouths when the very existence of all curses was rooted in the negative emotions of those monkeys? Their very existence is that of discord and suffering. Negativity that lasted beyond its progenitor to create creatures which turn on them to feast. To trust either cursed spirit's claim at face value without first searching for the hidden strings out for their necks would be moronic. Suguru moved with one eye over his shoulder, glancing back as much as he felt was necessary to keep the two brothers, if that is what they wished to call their bond, behind him from believing they could do anything else but follow his instructions. The curses under Suguru's command lie in wait within the energy swirling around him as a preemptive warning, appearing as nothing more than flickering apparitions poked out from his shadow upon taking the first step of this short, but troublesome escort. This way. Suguru's curses then vanished from sight, but not from their minds. The older curse, Chozo, acted as expected and placed itself between Suguru and the younger. A shield, a wall of separation that maintained its orientation along each turn of the path Suguru led them down as required. In the short time Suguru had spent observing the pair, he'd pegged the dynamic as that of a master and his loyal servant. A guard dog. One that had enough intelligence to know when to stay put and when to act as their first encounter under the bridge would have him believe. Chozo acted with Itadori's interests in mind and deferred to his judgment. The claim of the eldest did not appear to coincide with the greater power required to demand such loyalty, leaving Itadori the larger threat of the two despite the younger's current state. Lower-grade cursed spirits cowered at those above them. Curses were not known to fight amongst themselves, but in places where more than one cursed spirit congregated. Those with greater power claimed the territory as their own and the lesser creatures were left to gather on the fringes. Yet, Itadori yielded to Chozo at the older curse's insistence as well, which brought about a different interpretation of the two. The bid for rest. The offering of food. And now the unspoken rule that the younger should remain behind Chozo's shield. With their cursed energy muddled, suppressed and held tight to their chests, Suguru was left to assume, then, that the two were equals in power to warrant this level of companionship. It was the only explanation that made sense. Why else would Chozo use its shield to defend the sorcerer, who may as well be considered their natural enemy, against a power greater than he? Suguru was not blind to the curled fists kept at Itadori's sides. The inklings of cursed energy dripping out of twitching fingers, ready to strike at the slightest aggression. Itadori's eyes held none of the fondness or respect that were present when looking upon Satoru. Itadori did not care or trust him, and it was Chozo who acted as a reminder not to do anything rash. What had Suguru done to earn such resentment? If his skepticism was a thorn in the side of a larger scheme, then it should have been expected. If it was his attitude, then one could argue Satoru's was equally obnoxious in its own right. If it was for the future, he had yet to do whatever offense his future self committed against them. Directing animosity toward him when he had never heard of either brother before today did not seem fair. Then again, humoring such thoughts meant that Suguru would have to admit that their far-fetched tale was true. And Suguru was more inclined to believe the first two explanations before dealing with the ramifications of the third. You'll be staying here until we decide otherwise. Suguru looked to the building ahead as he spoke. The two behind him should be able to understand that was to be their place to stay without the need to point it out with his finger. Suguru remained in the hallway as the two moved into the first room he presented them with. Chozo nodded and pulled Itadori along, who did not look at him. The younger sibling walked over to the bed and collapsed without a modicum of grace. Itadori's back hit the sheets and only did both eyes close when Chozo claimed the bedside for itself. I'll remain with him. As if Suguru was going to offer a second room to something that had no need of it. What a waste that would be. Do as you wish. I will keep an eye out for Satoru. Do not leave this room unless permission is given. Out of their view, a wisp with too many eyes scurried out from Suguru's sleeve and embedded itself in the upper corner of the hallway's ceiling. Suguru would place more of these sentries as he saw fit to prevent any surprises from occurring under his watch. Understood. Suguru left at the curse's words, only advancing a handful of steps before Chozo's voice once again carried out into the hall. Thank you for enduring our walk. Suguru's footsteps faltered. The image of Chozo still looking over Itadori as Suguru left them had already told him who the elder brother was speaking to. The raised volume wasn't done on purpose. It would only be natural that the curse's voice would travel far in this empty shell of a building. That curse acted as though it possessed a shred of humanity. As much as Suguru detested going back on his prior judgment, he would concede that out of the two. It was more believable to acknowledge Itadori as a person. A sorcerer was another matter entirely, over the older brother only on the grounds of Satoru's elaborating on Itadori's state. Partial possession. A human with a cursed spirit inside, maintaining his sense of self. A featuring like that was impossible to believe. Suguru had already said as much himself, but under what circumstances would such a thing happen? And why would the school take him in as a student when Jujutsu law would demand his execution, as partial possession equates him to a cursed spirit regardless of the control Itadori maintained? Something told Suguru that if Satoru was indeed the boy's instructor, then there was a high chance that his interference was to blame for Itadori's enrollment. Poking back at the system and disrespecting the elders was Satoru's strong suit. You think that I'm a teacher in their supposed future as well? Imaging Satoru as an instructor in any capacity wasn't impossible, but it was difficult to say the least. The odds were against him, sure. Suguru couldn't picture his friend grading papers or teaching a traditional lecture or spending any long periods of time in the classroom setting of his own volition. Maturing in mindset was an unlikely dream to come true. Which left the only reason Satoru would ever do such a thing to be out of sheer boredom or with an alternative variable to push him in that direction. Still, Suguru found himself reminiscing on Satoru's tirades involving niche subjects of his choosing. Some of which would happen to align with the realm of education, especially when it came to explaining his own curse technique. If the same amount of enthusiasm was placed into the abilities of others, then working with a student through the fundamentals would be child's play, if Satoru possessed the patience or willingness to do so. Perhaps Suguru was giving this imagined Satoru of the future far too much credit. Just because he was supposedly Itadori's instructor, that did not mean he had to be a competent one. There was no possible way a movie marathon was for the good of any student's education or a part of the school's curriculum, no matter how many years pass by. A set of old stairs stood in Suguru's way, forcing him to pay attention to his steps as he made his ascent to avoid the noticeable cracks in the stone. Each step sent a small, but painful jolt through Suguru's body, compounded by the motion of pressing into it further as he pushed his body up higher and higher. like a nail being forcibly pounded into his skull, worsening the growing headache that sought to compound his day with even more problems than was necessary. And to think Satoru would so adamantly believe Suguru was teaching alongside him. To spend another decade at this school. Juggling the responsibilities of studies and missions, Satoru already went on mission after mission with what has to be little to no downtime to breathe, let alone think. Teaching. Another step. Training. Again. Working. Watch for the broken ledge. Suffering. Another goddamn step. Rinse and repeat. One curse after another. When would it end? Final step. Suguru reached the top of the stairs. The shadows of the building before him enveloped the area. A gentle breeze weaved along the path provided by the gap between the building's outer walls and the foliage surrounding it. Returning in Suguru's time of need as he closed his eyes and released the tension swelling throughout the deepest recesses of his body. To even suggest that Suguru would do such a thing after graduating, the thought alone was torture enough. And yet, if Satoru was truly by his side through such a taxing endeavor, perhaps it would be bearable, for a time. A decade still felt a decade too many. Suguru reopened his eyes on the entrance of the building he was looking for. The nurse's office, which had long since been annexed as part of Shoko's dwellings, given that she spent so much of her time there, lay further inside. All that was required of him was a short walk ahead to the far end of the hall. The door was left open as there would be no one to pass by who wasn't in need of Shoko's time when the room's entrance sat at the end of the hall. If the light wasn't to be believed as proof enough that someone was on the other side. The pained hiss that hit Suguru's ears just as he poked his head through the door frame to find that Shoko was not alone as he'd hoped. And done, Shoko declared as she removed the gloves from her hands. "You're such a baby." The second body sitting on the examination table in the middle of the room belonged to Habara, who was in the midst of stretching and flexing his exposed arm. "I am not. I make the perfectly average amount of noise a person would make when their arm is all sliced up." Such words were spoken lightly, given the severity of such an injury the underclassman described. "You're lucky I was available when you got here, or else you'd be getting stitches and a whole slew of scars from someone else." Based on that, Suguru deduced Habara must have just arrived on campus shortly after he did. The lack of evidence of Habara's wounds that had been present on his arm confirmed this. The reverse curse technique can't do away with scarring if the process had already begun. But scars are cool, right? Maybe I should have waited. Please tell me you're joking." Suguru ended that train of thought, not wishing to see anyone humor avoiding treatment for something so trivial. "Oh, Gito-senpai." The perky underclassman was the first to notice him, prompting Shoko to turn around from her counter with suspicion in her eyes. "What are you doing here? You're not hurt, are you?" Suguru raised a hand to placate Habara's concern. "I assure you I am in good health." Shoko let out a cough into her sleeve, obscuring what Suguru had assumed was a challenge to his claim. Ignoring this, Suguru quickly gave the room a once-over to confirm the missing presence of someone who normally wouldn't escape Habara's side. "Where's Nanami? I thought you both were assigned on a mission together." "We were. But it was a low-grade mission that really didn't need two sorcerers, so he got sent to deal with a second-grade cursed spirit in Shizuoka. I took on a third grade in Nagano, which turned out to be a semi-second grade after all, but I managed just fine." See, the proud smile on Habara's face did nothing to remove the sick feeling in Suguru's chest. Habara was a second-grade sorcerer. Taking on and disposing of a second-grade curse or below was expected of him, but his technique relied on working with others to maximize its efficiency. To assign him a mission alone was irresponsible. It was. And Nanami should be back by morning. Suguru blinked as he came to realize he'd missed the latter portion of Habara's story. At least he wasn't expected to respond, as Shoko took the opportunity to shift the topic of the conversation onto Suguru's unexpected arrival. "What trouble did you and Gojo get involved in, and why do I have to be dragged into it?" "I can't ever imagine why you would think we would get into trouble." "On a day off, no less." Shoko's deadpan look tore right through Suguru's sarcasm. "You look worse than when you both left for Shibuya. Did you even try to eat anything while you were out?" Gojo spent all morning ranting about some melonpan ice cream stall he just had to try. Wow, that sounds delicious. Please tell me you got some, senpai. No, they didn't get any ice cream because someone got them lost searching for the damn stall. Let's just say Satoru's stories were exaggerated. Suguru forced himself to smile to further avoid answering the question. But you had fun, right? Man, I wish I could have gone. I heard it's crazy packed this time of year. Maybe I can stop by in a few days if we get a break from classes. Back to the important things, Shoko tapped her pen on the clipboard holding the paperwork she'd begun filling out while they were speaking. Why are you here and did you get me anything? A bottle of sake? The nerve you have to be worried about my health. No, we didn't get you anything. You can blame Satoru for that one. Suguru paused, his thoughts caught in the memory of Itadori's warning. The implications of time travel. Surely he wasn't alone in thinking it was nonsense. I have a question for the both of you. Humor me for a moment. The two before him nodded. What are your thoughts on time travel? That's a weird question. Shoko was the first to comment, with Habara to follow. Yeah. Like, are you talking about time travel in general or whether we believe it's possible? Are you asking about movies? Just your thoughts on the subject. It's for a bet I have going on with Satoru, that wasn't entirely inaccurate. Oh, okay then. Time travel is complicated and hurts my brain thinking about it, but I think it's still really cool. I wonder what time traveling feels like. A hum filled in the air as Habara crossed his legs together on the table. You know what? If I could time travel right now, I'd use it to stop myself from drinking that spoiled drink from the vending machine a couple of days ago. Why would you do that? The question slipped out of Suguru's mouth before he could register it. Because I paid for it. Well, I paid for it later. Nanami was the one who put the yen in the machine. I wasn't going to waste his money, and it tasted fine at the time. Habara's justification did nothing to prevent Shoko from sticking out her tongue. Gross. Expiration dates exist for a reason. Shoko then returned to the original question, beginning her answer with a shrug. Time travel. I really don't care about it as a trope. I mean, it's something, but I guess if we want to talk about regrets, I would tell my past self to apply for the Kyoto school instead of this one. So many fewer headaches to deal with. You don't mean that, Iori-senpai? Are you sure about that? Shoko hypocritically teased when she herself has chastised Satoru on more than one occasion for picking on their underclassmen. To every rule, there was always an exception to be found. Nonetheless, the teasing ended as quickly as it started, with both Shoko and Habara laughing off her answer. Say, Gito-senpai, what would you do if you could? Their amusement was cut short the moment Habara halted his question, as he already guessed an answer that made theirs appear frivolous by comparison. His own guilt flashed across his face. Only for a moment, but a moment was all it took for the air to grow too cumbersome to breathe in as an unpleasant silence swept in. Amane Riko. Suguru's answer was obvious, wasn't it? However, the choice each of them would make to alter wasn't the focus of Suguru's interest. What was more curious to him was the apparent get-out-of-jail-free card for the consequences of their own decisions in the scenario of time travel provided. If time travel could be used to undo past lapses in judgment, then what would be the point in doing anything if you know it can be undone? Only in hindsight can one decide whether to regret the actions of their past. Suguru found regret in Amane Riko's fate, as he did in the fate of the masses that applauded her end. A new revelation that could not have been unearthed if Amane didn't die that day. If given the chance to change only one of those outcomes, deciding between the two might as well be a coin toss, given Suguru's current appraisal of how he felt. A very different view than that of the teenager who walked with Amane to Tenjin's domain to hear her tearful confession. See, that's what I mean about time travel hurting my brain. Habara grabbed his skull with both hands to make a point, pulling his bangs back as he looked up at Suguru with his answer. I like to think I'm pretty good at judging right and wrong, but I'm not perfect, and sometimes I mess up. If someone tells me otherwise, from the future or not, maybe they have a point and I should listen, because who wouldn't want the better outcome? But I guess, if no time traveler from the future is telling me to stop what I'm doing, then I'm in the right as far as the future is concerned. The underclassman's confidence returned, along with a smirk on Haber's face. He was pleased with his answer. But time travel can't actually exist, right? Or else people would be changing the past all the time. I feel like that would break the universe or something. Especially if people kept trying to mess with the same point in time, wouldn't that be a mess? Yes. It would. Haber's comment prompted Suguru to settle on a new conclusion when assessing Itadori's claim. Either the pair appeared in their time through limited means, blundered through time via an accident or, once again, the whole explanation was an expertly fabricated lie. Now I'm getting a headache just thinking about it, Shoko groaned, aggressively signing off the paper in front of her before tapping the back of Haber's head with her clipboard. As your acting physician, I prescribe a fulfilling meal and a good night's rest, no expired food. Now get out of here before I make you. I'm a very busy person, you know. Okay. I'm going. Haber hopped off the table and dashed out of the room, his voice trailing behind him as he added one last thing before disappearing down the hall completely. And it was one time. Keep telling yourself that Shoko, who Suguru was positive did not hold a medical license to be qualified as a physician, proceeded to smack the back of his shoulder while he was still fixated on the spot Haber last stood in the hall. Wanna tell me why some stupid bet is making you look so constipated? I do not look. You do. I can find a mirror if you don't believe me. Her insistence was becoming a pain, but that did not mean her observation was any less true. I'll pass. A bit disappointed in Suguru's answer, Shoko tossed her clipboard aside and crossed her arms, awaiting further explanation on the context she is missing out on. Haber is gone, so I'll ask you again, what trouble did you and Gojo get into? You ask that as if we searched for it. And you're not denying it. Spill. Suguru closed his eyes and sorted through what he knew, organizing the day's events the best way he could for his explanation. Walk and talk. It's best if you see with your own eyes what we're dealing with. Shoko looked at her desk, finding nothing else in need of her immediate assistance before agreeing to accompany Suguru back outside. She did well to keep her voice down to a whisper as Suguru did during their walk. Lighting a cigarette on the way to fiddle between her teeth as he caught her up on the two brothers from the future and the cryptic warning that came with them. Needless to say, there was no predicting how Shoko would react, but her nonchalant attitude covered up by the forced display of shock about the whole affair was consistent with what Suguru expected. You're telling me that Gojo grows up to be a teacher? I never said he grew up, only that this Itadori claims that Satoru is his instructor. That sentence could be said 100 times over. And Suguru would still find himself unable to truly accept it. Sounds impossible, right? More like extremely irresponsible. Gojo can barely take care of himself, let alone other smaller humans that are told to do as he says. Shoko blew out a cloud of smoke away from Suguru the best she could. The smell was pungent enough to reach his nose, but he appreciated that Shoko attempted to make the effort. I'm too sober for this. You shouldn't be drinking. I shouldn't be smoking either, but here we are. A fucking teacher, another drawn-out exhale. And this Itadori is brothers with a curse? A special grade. Acts as if it's human. I would assume Itadori's cursed energy would have to rival Chozo's, though only Satoru would be able to answer if his student's strength comes from his body or the curse possessing him. He was supposed to be probing the older brother for more information while I retrieved you. While you grabbed another accomplice to share the blame when you both get your ears blown off by Sensei for this stunt. I see how it is. You can always turn around and deny ever speaking to me if you don't want to get involved. Satoru was the one who wanted you to check on Itadori. While I prefer you be at least aware of what we've gotten ourselves into, I won't force you to get involved. You might not believe it to be worth the headache. Worth the headache? Are you still hung up on what I said about enrolling in the Kyoto school instead? I thought you were the smart one. Shoko chuckled as she snuffed out the butt of her cigarette against the pack she had pulled it from before discarding it in the approaching waste bin. This is the most interesting thing to happen around here in months, and all three of us are going to be at the center of it. Someone has to bring common sense into this. Yaga-sensei can lay on the lecture of a lifetime because I'm not missing out on learning about all the dumb shit adult you and Satoru have done. Not you too, so much for common sense. Not only are you humoring this future talk, but you appear to have left your future self out of the discussion. That's because I don't do dumb shit, Shoko retorted. The genuine joy on her face was short-lived, replaced by something softer, more melancholic as their destination came into view. You know, I missed this. I'm not saying you should go get yourself hurt, but any excuse to come see me would be nice. And take away from those who actually need your help? That's rather selfish. Despite pushing away the idea, Shoko's suggestion didn't disappear completely from Suguru's mind. I'm sure we can make something work. Gojo storms in whether I'm with someone or not. It might do you some good to do the same. Be careful what you wish for. Acting like Satoru is the last thing you want from anyone. You may have a point, Shoko conceded, falling back a few paces as Suguru took the lead upon approaching the guest house steps. Satoru's presence was absent from the front, but the cursed energy inside confirmed that both he and their guests were inside as Suguru had left them. Deciding it would be better to first reconvene and learn what information Satoru was supposed to have gathered. Suguru followed his friend's cursed energy to the common room on the other end of the hall, dumbfounded to find the one in question laying on the floor. By the looks of it, Satoru's chair had fallen backwards, possibly from leaning too far back, and instead of getting up and fixing the chair back upright, Satoru remained in place with his legs balancing on the supports of the chair with a hand grasping the bottom of his chin. Suguru couldn't tell if the dejected look was from thinking too hard or getting caught in such an embarrassing position. Is that comfortable? Shoko wiggled her way past Suguru's body to stand over the teenager on the floor. The hand covering her mouth only brought further attention to the snickering behind it, not that Satoru paid it any mind. Yes, actually, I like it down here. You should try it. I'm good, thanks. I prefer my neck pain-free. Your loss. The boundless energy Satoru was known for appeared to have dried up in Suguru's absence. Even as his friend crossed his legs and made a point to look as if he actually found comfort in his perplexing state, something felt off from Satoru's usual antics. His conversation with that curse must be to blame. Care to fill us in? Satoru dared to pause and think about denying Suguru's request before a snarky grin peeked out of his facade. Chozo is a kamo. A kamo? A curse can't be, that's wrong. A vengeful spirit would fit that explanation. Chozo is the older brother, right? Drawing on Suguru's prior explanation, Shoko guessed correctly, earning 2 thumbs up her way. Yup, turns out, he's not just any old special grade cursed spirit, but a death painting. You know what those are, don't you, Suguru? Obviously, I pay attention to our sensei's lectures. Classified as cursed objects, the failed experiments of Kamo Noritoshi were currently stored within the campus' heavily guarded warehouse. Since Kamo Noritoshi partook in their conception, referring to those things as his bastard children was the only connecting thread to warrant bestowing the family name, and even then, a death painting. All 9 were accounted for. If one had been removed and incarnated into a vessel, there would have been some kind of a formal announcement at best and a slew of rumors hinting at a breach in the school's security at worst. But Satoru, that shouldn't be possible. But it is. And it explains so much, doesn't it? At least the whole human-like thing. We could bet money if he has any of the Kamo clan's cursed techniques. We're not, even if what you're saying is true. How does Itadori fit into this? Is the younger brother a Kamo as well? Distantly, perhaps? Being a member of the big 3 clans came with a variety of privileges that could explain the odd situation in which a possessed person is allowed to walk free if the rest of Itadori's story is to be believed. Or it's simpler than that, and Itadori was a death painting as well. That would bring the total of stolen cursed objects to 2. I'm 99% sure he isn't. Born over a century apart, same shitty dad. Can anyone guess how that works? More time travel. Shoko's previously earned thumbs up was spun around, drawing not only her ire but Suguru's as well. He was growing impatient with the games Satoru was making of this. If you have the answer, just say it. You're no fun, this wasn't meant to be fun. The answer is repetitive body snatching. One person after another. Noritoshi isn't even the first victim. Body snatching? Victim? That sounds insane. I agree. Satoru rolled out of his seat and onto his feet, stretching his neck and shoulders while he used his foot to kick the chair back into its proper place. Complete nonsense. Absolutely bonkers. I mean, body snatching and time travel. Aren't you supposed to keep your stories simple when you lie? As much as Suguru had hoped for this to be a moment of clarity for his friend, the glint in his eyes behind those shades of his revealed Satoru's true thoughts on the matter. And yet you still believe it. Satoru tapped his nose twice as he passed by Suguru on his way to the hall. As if that was supposed to be an answer. Oh, and my possession theory about Yuji was correct, by the way. He's got it bad. Still don't have a name on the specific cursed spirit, but we just asked him that ourselves. Satoru gestured for Suguru and Shoko to follow him. The latter a bit more eager and thus taking Suguru's spot behind him. Even as the two scurried ahead to peek inside, Suguru maintained his slow pace and observed the looks of curiosity at the sight before them. I thought Big Brother wanted you to be sleeping? Itadori was awake. By the time Suguru could enter the room, the two had already invited themselves inside, filling the already tight space to a degree that Suguru was not thrilled with. Remaining in the doorway was already pushing it, but it gave him a chance to observe Itadori without drawing the same level of attention to himself as before. The younger teenager was sitting upright, arms on his knees, with red covering his face. The sudden intrusion brought about shock, but it was obvious the boy had been upset before their arrival, not that he was going to admit it. I still do. Itadori sighed at Chozo's remark. I slept in the car. I'm fine. Really, there's a lot on my mind right now. It's hard to just shut my brain off for a bit. You know, when he finally looked up to properly greet his hosts, the same recognition Itadori held for Aijichi flashed across his face as he locked eyes with Shoko. Satoru picked up on this right away as he stole the only other unoccupied chair in the room and twirled it around at the foot of Itadori's bed to sit on it backward with the back straddled between his legs. Sitting on it the proper way was, apparently, too much to ask of him. Cool, I don't need to introduce Shoko to you. Shoko, on the other hand. This is Itadori and his curse brother from another mother. Itadori waved a nervous hand in the air. Hello, Mom. Mom, do I look old to you? Without any sense of caution to speak of, Shoko stomped over to Itadori as she scrutinized every bit of him as he frantically shook his head. Chozo stiffened in his seat, his eyes locked onto Shoko as Satoru looked at him. All silently waiting for the other to do something that warranted action while the two in the center appeared to ignore their presence completely. It's eerie. At least you're trying to be polite. And let me guess, I still live in the nurse's office and this isn't the first time I've had to check on your health? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Then you know the drill. Tell me where you're hurt, and I'll see what I can do. Don't bother hiding anything. I can smell the blood on your clothes and the scars speak for themselves. The reverse curse technique won't be able to get rid of those, though. Sorry, it was hard for Suguru to tell if Shoko's casual disposition with their supposed time traveler stemmed from a willingness to believe his story or as a means to get the boy to open up to her. Faster, banking on a prior connection Itadori may already have to her. And while it appeared it may have worked, Satoru's following comment did the opposite. Don't sweat it. The scars are totally badass. You got him good, right? Took care of the guy responsible. Suguru watched Itadori avert his eyes, his nails tearing at the fabric of his pants in what he surmised was shame for not living up to Satoru's expectations. No, I didn't. He got away. Before the statement could truly sink in, Itadori lifted his head with a pained smile on his face. It was the first one Suguru witnessed from him, and he, out of all people, knew just how fake it was. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Still a bit tired, but fine. Akotsu-senpai already healed all my injuries after he killed. Itadori stopped himself too late. The beginnings of the word slipping off his tongue were enough to fill in the space left behind. There was little point in denying it, but all 3 third years remained on edge as they waited for Itadori to finish in hopes that he had been misheard. Killed me. Quickly, Itadori clarified how that statement was possible, given that the dead should not be walking about as if nothing happened. He did. But it's okay. He healed me a split second after, and no, I'm all good. See? Once the younger teenager removed his jacket, Suguru could not stop himself from recoiling at the sight of Itadori's shirt. The cut of a blade tore right through the center of his chest. Dried blood surrounding the wound only further proved that something had been stabbed directly into his heart. Curse or not, to see such a sight on a teenager formed a pervasive nausea that did not disappear even when the shirt was lifted to reveal no sign of entry on the skin. Shoko leaned closer and tapped the area with her fingers, catching Itadori off guard as she confirmed some truth to his story. A reverse curse technique was definitely used here. Really following in the steps of your sensei there, she shot a judgmental look at the teenager beside her. Already deciding that Satoru was somehow the blame for this. In any other circumstance, Suguru would have joined in with a witty remark of his own, but he was far too fixated on the person Itadori described. The reverse curse technique was a rarity among sorcerers. To exercise such control to successfully bring Itadori back indicated that this Akotsu's skill could rival that of Shoko's. For now, Suguru would do well to hold his tongue in saying it aloud. I don't know what you mean. Itadori looked to Satoru for an answer to Shoko's words as he shied further away from her progressively invasive touch, now that her medical interest was piqued. Was Itadori feigning ignorance? If Itadori was not aware of Satoru's near-death experience at the hands of that sorcerer killer, then how was he aware of Satoru's hollow purple technique? The only time Suguru knew of Satoru using it since that encounter was in private during the very few times he'd witnessed his friend work to hone his cursed techniques. Which made the chances of Itadori seeing it as well grow slimmer under that set of circumstances. As much as I love attention, let's keep talking about you. Why are students killing each other in the future? Unless there has been an increase in baby making, we don't have the sorcerers to be pitting you guys in death matches. There was almost a hint of concern in Satoru's voice. The thought of his own theory ringing true riled him up even more. Chozo looked as though he were about to object, but Itadori stopped him, prepared to provide the context they were missing out on. It wasn't a death match. I don't even know where to begin. A lot happened all at once. Itadori placed a hand over the remnant of his wound in his fabric. You can sense it? Yeah, the curse inside me. I was actually supposed to be executed months ago when I first got possessed. But since I was able to remain in control of myself, Gojo-sensei had delayed the execution and enrolled me in Jujutsu Tech as one of his students. A lot of things have happened since then, and now, Gojo-sensei isn't around to stop them, so the elders made my execution immediate. Akotsu-senpai took a binding vow to be my executioner. Itadori's fondness for his sensei went beyond what was typically expected. Satoru saved his life, and while there were details intentionally missing, the fact remained that there appeared to be some level of attachment there. If that truly were the case, then where was Satoru when his student needed him? Out of all the excuses Suguru was about to make for his friend, one went completely ignored, as that was a line he refused to willingly cross. And as for Satoru himself, his friend ignored that bit entirely. At first. But he didn't kill you. Why? Technically, he did, or else he'd face the consequences of not following through with it, Itadori sheepishly corrected him. Before everything went to hell, Gojo-sensei asked for Akotsu-senpai to watch over me in case anything happened to him. Senpai's been training abroad, so it was actually the first time we met. Can you believe it? I thought Akotsu-senpai was actually serious about killing me too. He's only a second year, but he's extremely powerful. I almost mistook his energy for yours. Another special grade sorcerer? Only someone of that degree in power could match with Satoru and to possess the necessary skills to complement said strength. Future or not. A fourth special grade sorcerer exists if this abridged tale is to be believed. Itadori, as honest as he came across, picked his details carefully for a reason that still remained out of Suguru's reach. I'm insulted, Yuji. As if anyone could be as strong as me. Well, except Suguru. And that one lady. The serious tone left Satoru's voice as he took in Itadori's story, flipping back to what he'd previously glossed over. So, what's this about me not being around? Did I leave my phone on silent or are sorcerers finally getting vacation days? Huh, wouldn't that be a miracle, huh? Itadori didn't share in his amusement. The younger teenager bit his lip, eyes flickering around the room while hesitating on his response. The sudden unwillingness to answer was not something any of them could ignore, but rather than force it out, Satoru filled in the blank himself. Oh shit. I'm totally dead, aren't I? With all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. And no. That's not. Itadori's objections fell on deaf ears as Satoru continued on with his asinine line of thinking. No need to spare my feelings. I get it. Your super cool sensei totally kicked the bucket and left his students to pick up the pieces. I'd be pissed off too. Satoru, enough. Anger flared through Suguru's body as he slammed his heel into the ground, the cursed spirits he'd summoned still hidden from sight, pulsating with the same spike of emotion. Suguru was unable to understand, to comprehend, Satoru's sheer lack of tact on the subject of his own, no. He refused to believe it. He couldn't. Even if everything else shared today was the absolute truth, this was not. And yet Satoru continued to speak. Well, now that the big secret is out of the way, did I die cool? Blaze of glory, come on, might as well spill the rest, oh. Please don't tell me You aren't dead. Suguru was not alone in his outburst, accompanied by Itadori, who shared in the same frustration and feverish intensity. But where Suguru locked up at his initial outburst, the younger teenager broke down further with hands rushing to wipe away the tears drawing his eyes before any could escape him. His digits were shaking, the same panic bleeding into his voice as he begged for Satoru to stop. Stop talking like that. Please. Gojo-sensei isn't dead. Shoko retreated out of the older brother's way, backing up beside Suguru to give the curse the space he desired to reach out for Itadori in an attempt to calm him down. However, the curse's good intentions were only received by the first sign of rejection from Itadori, as the younger shoved Chozo's hand away. I'm fine. Itadori wasn't fine. He was a liar. If not to them, then to himself. Okay. You're right. I'm not dead. I'm right here, breathing and everything. That was the closest Satoru was going to get to an apology, his tone doing more to convey his regret than the words he spoke. While Chozo did not care for his actions, Itadori caught on to what Satoru meant and his breathing slowed, once again more attuned to Satoru's unique communication methods than most. Suguru, however, could not let the matter go so easily. It stuck to him, festering under his skin when it had no place to. Humans die. Sorcerers die. More often than not, cursed spirits were to blame. To believe Satoru was above that was to live in denial. Yet, to be forced to face such truths now, even in jest, Suguru was not in the right state to do so. A tap against Suguru's hand caught his attention. Glancing down revealed it to be Shoko's fingers brushing against his own, aware that Itadori was not the only one troubled by the topic their conversation had drifted in. No matter what they spoke of next, the air had already turned sour. Nothing that came after this was going to change that. It was all too easy for Suguru to pull his hand away and retreat into his pockets. Grabbing hold of it was not something Suguru was willing to push himself to do either. Thus he made the best of both worlds and returned the gesture by tapping Shoko's hand back before pulling away completely. You're alive, Itadori affirmed, equally to himself and those around him. Pressing his glasses as close to his face as possible, Satoru sighed. Just not around. It's not your fault. Everything happened so fast and we failed. Big time, Itadori rambled on, once again avoiding the actual incident surrounding this mixed bag of events he'd already spoken of. I'm sorry. I'm not good at, there isn't an easy way to explain this, and things are still sinking in. Everything feels like a dream. Like, I didn't think I'd be talking to you so soon and then Ijichi shows up with the car, but it's no Ijichi. It's some teenager who talks like him, it's a lot. You being here wasn't intentional. It was Suguru's turn to press Itadori for further information. As he expected, it drew all eyes in the room on him, with Itadori visibly surprised that he was being addressed. What relationship did they have, if any, to make Itadori act that way? No. We were walking through Shibuya on our way back to the school, and suddenly we're in the middle of a huge crowd of people that weren't there before and the date said 2007. I know it sounds like an excuse, but that's all we know. Then we ran into you guys not too long after. Talk about luck. Did luck really have anything to do with it? Satoru turned around in his seat, nodding with an before bending just far back enough to face the group as some revelation had dawned on him. I don't know about you guys, but I'm sensing there is a lot more that needs to be explained, and I think we might benefit from a small break. Right, Shoko? Something about resting the brain to enhance attention span and memory or whatever. You aren't wrong. So, how about this? You answer one more question for me, a simple one, and then we take 5. See about getting some drinks for the rest of us while you work through the best way to explain the end of the world. Might be hard, given that I'm more of a visual learner, but you'll make it work. A break sounded good right now. No one else appeared to hold any objections, least of all Itadori, who had looked a bit relieved to be out of the spotlight, even if only for a few minutes. Okay, I'll do my best. It's an easy one. Satoru pointed a finger directly at Itadori. What is the name of the curse your senpai executed you over? The younger teenager froze. Right, you don't know. I knew that, and I still. Itadori looked down at his open palm, methodically flexing his fingers before tucking both hands in his lap. He sat up straight, face absent of the minor flares of emotion he'd displayed earlier to make room for the grave look that accompanied an answer that made every cursed spirit in Suguru's possession, driven by pure instinct, shudder in absolute terror. Ryomen Sukuna. Notes. I was going to update my other thing, but I didn't. Oops. Suguru's POV was interesting. It is my first time writing for him as it was with Chozo, so I hope it felt in character overall. A bit nervous on this one NGL. I plan to do Yuji's POV for the next chapter, thus getting us all 4 leads a POV each before I start switching around between them to whatever I find is most fun for the day. I'm going to do my best not to simply run through the events of the Shibuya incident while also not info dumping a billion things at once. I'm trying to take into account what Yuji would want to reveal v what he thinks should be revealed, so it's going to be something I can promise you that. Notes. Heibara. Yes. I'm very excited to write this little ray of sunshine here. I really do like the small time Suguru and Heibara got to talk in the manga, so I wanted to expand on that here. At some point I'll have Nanami make a cameo too, but I don't plan on shifting too far away from the main 4 as focus. Using Heibara to parallel Yuji was very much intentional, especially as Suguru grew to see Yuji as something more than just a curse as he had time to think about Yuji's situation. Though with the name of the curse being revealed, that might no longer be the case. I'm also just living for Shoko, Suguru and Satoru's friendship. I really wanted to make a point that while they are a bit estranged, the 3 still care about each other enough, look out for one another and notice if something is wrong. Time will tell if Satoru's and Shoko's concern will see through Suguru enough to know that he's not doing well in other aspects of his life, and not just with this time travel nonsense. If I have more to say I'll add it in later. Thank you guys so much for the amazing feedback. See you all next time.